Hello, my name is Rajiv Maher. I'm a PhD candidate here at the Doughty Centre for Corporate Responsibility at the School of Management, and I'm here to talk with O Keefe, Director at Synergy Consultancy, who specialise in mining company community relations, also within the extractive sector, looking at oil and gas clients as well. And we'll be talking about some of the difficulties, challenges and best practices involved when mining companies relate with their local communities in a developing world context.
We've been working on these issues of mining and community relations for over 10 years now at Synergy, and the main reason that we find that they're important to the mining companies to consider is really around risk management and as well as business opportunities. So we do find that on the international scene, there's a lot of trends which are pushing companies into this area: investor pressure, NGO pressure, media pressure, as well as government regulations. But at the heart of it, what we're seeing is really, we find that companies that manage community relations well prosper as a business, and they help manage some real core business risks. At the end of the day, what mining companies need to survive and prosper is they need access to land, they need to employ people, they need to have access to resources, and they need the infrastructure to support them, as well as the wider support from the communities around them and the government. And so all of those factors, within all of those factors, good relationships with communities, neighbouring communities and host communities is critical to that success. And also, if they get that well, that would generally benefit communities as well. So there tends to be a virtuous cycle in these things when they start working well. So yeah, certainly having worked in this area for 10 years, we're still certainly very busy. And there's certainly a downside to that is we do see across the world that mining companies are still not doing it as well as we would expect. When we started going into this field a decade ago, there were lots of questions about how to do it, how to get it right. I think now, in the past 10 years, we've moved beyond that. We know in many ways what the answers are. We know how to get it right. We need to know what needs to be put in place for mining companies to have good relationships with communities. However, what we're seeing consistently is that not being put into practice, the same mistakes being made. And it's something that we constantly grapple with is why is that the case? Why do companies carry on doing bad things, really? And there's a lot of factors in that. I think what we're seeing is, although the international factors and the government policies that we see being put in place, that is starting to create a slightly more level playing field. But at the end of the day, it's very possible for companies to be successful and still do bad things. It's still possible for them to mess up, to not have good community relations and still do bad things. So at the heart of it, what we're also seeing is the companies that are doing really well, that are having really good relationships with communities and having a positive impact on those communities. We're seeing several common factors that come out. One of them, which is fairly surprising, is that almost consistently they've messed up really badly in the past. The real leaders, we do see, they tend to have a history, or the individuals involved in that leadership have had experiences of seeing the problems, seeing the downsides of making really bad mistakes. And importantly, they've learned from that and adapted that and changed their business model as a result of it. What we do see now with the massive resource growth that's going on, the massive influx of companies into Africa, for instance, and the many new projects which are going on there, we see a lot of new players, and they don't have that experience, and they're often the ones that make the mistakes. Or similarly, it's the companies that have made mistakes in the past, but they simply haven't learned from it. The other area is leadership. So where we see companies doing really well or doing badly is leadership or lack of leadership, and particularly leadership with values as well. The best cases that we see, often behind that we see leaders even in middle management or on the ground, but still in a leadership position, but often at a senior leadership position at a board level or CEO level. We see them having very strong values, them deciding to place their business strategy in a way that they tie up community relations issues and positive impact on community with their core business strategy. Mining is a business that involves huge changes, digging big holes in the ground or digging big holes underground, and massive infrastructure around that, huge numbers of people involved, and that creates huge change, and this is often the driver for a lot of the problems and challenges that we see mining companies. First of all, they need access to land. In many cases, unless companies are very fortunate, those resources, the mineral resources under the ground, are located in places where people are using the land on the surface, particularly for farming. And so there's immediately a conflict there between land use and these challenges, the land use issues and how to access the land without creating problems is probably the most common issue that we see, and that is very difficult, and it requires a very sophisticated, detailed understanding of land tenure issues, land use issues, livelihoods, the wider economy, and particularly if you're having to displace people or land use, it's very hard to replace that. So we work on a lot of resettlement and compensation issues, and it's simply not very easy. It takes time, it takes effort, mistakes will be made. And so it takes a lot of determination, but also having the right people in place. The other issue we see is the problems often stack up very early and much earlier than many companies recognise. So as soon as they have geologists on the ground, they're interacting with the community, creating a relationship and having an impact on those livelihoods. And that relationship right at the outset can often set the frame for the relationship and up until the mining operation starts, which may be many years, if not decades later. But those really early relationships are often really critical. The other common issue that we're seeing, particularly in Africa at the moment, is and in the gold sector, where a lot of our work is artisanal small-scale mining. And this is another case of where there's conflicts in land use. There's competition over the mineral resources, and it's really two very different kinds of sectors competing over the same resource. You have a large-scale industrial process competing with a very small-scale manual process, and very different kinds of impacts, different kinds of power relations playing there. And it's a problem for many gold mining companies that we're seeing in Africa at the moment. And to be perfectly honest, we haven't seen many successful solutions. I think partly because there's not a silver bullet solution. Some people are pushing for legal solutions, for security solutions, for straight exclusion solutions. None of them work by themselves, and the real solutions to these problems is particularly around people getting around the same table together and talking things through. Where we see companies getting it right is, first of all, treating this as a core business process, treating their relationships with the communities and the impacts they have on communities, just as they would any other aspect of financial management, of resource management, of people management. So in many cases that's putting in the same processes and procedures and integrating those in business decisions. So whenever key decisions are made around investments, that the community social aspects are tied into that. And very simple issues around reporting, around organisational structure, really just treating it the same as any other kind of business. The other black box that we're really looking into is the leadership and the skills and the capacity. I think we're seeing this as a bit of a glass ceiling in terms of where companies can get to. Even where they have the systems and procedures in place, it's often very difficult for them to get the right people to manage this. The right people even and provide the training and support that these people need to do their job correctly. And I think we're finding that there's a unique set of skills that people who manage community relations, social issues need, and it's often very different to the typical kind of skills which are valued and common within mining companies, which are often engineering, financial, planning type skills. The people who really excel at community relations, social issues, are able to look at much more complex issues, look at complex systems, and help manage them rather than a more linear system. They're able to hold short-term issues and long-term issues. They're able to look at the micro community individual level, but also understand how that links with the macro national international level. So it's a very different skill set. And also at the core of this is values and integrity, and that's a very difficult thing for a company to manage and create and take hold of. But I think we are seeing many companies who are hiring people because of their values. We've talked to people who say, we've hired geologists and they're great geologists, but we've also hired them because we know that we can put them in the middle of nowhere in a community, and they'll also be great at community relations. And I think that's possibly the challenge for the next decade for the mining sector, is how to find those people and how to build them up, support them, and provide people the skills to do this thing right.
Thank you very much, Ed. That was very insightful and useful, and thank you for coming along.